My girlfriend cheated with my boss, so I exposed them both to corporate. You know that feeling when you think your life is finally on the right track? The job is good, the future looks bright, and the person you love feels like your other half? I was living that life. I had a girlfriend I was ready to propose to and a boss who was my mentor. The only problem was, they were the same two people. This isn't a story about a screaming match in the street or a fist fight in a parking lot. This is the story about how I burned it all down with a single click, and why, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. My name is Alex, and for 27 years, I felt like I was playing life on easy mode. I wasn't a genius or a trust fund kid, but I had a knack for things, a certain quiet determination that got me where I needed to go. That determination landed me a junior analyst position at a prestigious marketing firm, Sterling & Dre. The pay was good, the benefits were better, and the office had that sleek, minimalist vibe that made you feel important just for breathing the air. And at the top of the food chain, in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, was Mr. Henderson. To me, he wasn't just a boss, he was a god. In his late 40s, with a jawline that could cut glass and a tailored suit that probably cost more than my car, he was the epitome of success. He took me under his wing, praising my presentations, giving me advice that felt less like corporate jargon and more like genuine wisdom. He was a mentor, a leader. He was also, as I would soon discover, a snake. Then there was Chloe, my Chloe. We met in a coffee shop, a meet-cute so perfect it felt scripted. She was an artist, all paint-splattered jeans and a laugh that could make a rainy day feel like the sun was out. She was vibrant and chaotic, and the complete opposite of my structured, predictable world. She balanced me. We moved in together after a year, and our small apartment became my sanctuary. It was filled with her canvases, the scent of turpentine and lavender, and the warmth of her presence. We'd talk about the future, not in vague terms, but with concrete plans. A house with a garden, a trip to Italy, a golden retriever we'd name Picasso. I had the ring. It was a simple, elegant diamond band, hidden in the back of my sock drawer, waiting for the perfect moment. I was so close to having it all. The first crack in the porcelain was so small I almost missed it. It was a Thursday. Chloe had been working late at her part-time gallery job more often, which wasn't unusual. But this night, she came home smelling not of paint and wine, but of Mr. Henderson's cologne, a specific, smoky, woodsy scent called oud and bergamot that I'd recognized from a magazine article about his signature style. I'd once even complimented him on it. When I asked her about her night, she was a little too quick, a little too bright with her answer. She talked about a new artist, a last-minute event, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. She kissed me, but the kiss felt like a performance. I shrugged it off. Paranoia, I told myself. The stress of the job was getting to me. But the scent lingered in the air long after she'd gone to sleep, a ghost in our bedroom, a seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of my perfect life. A few days later, I saw it again. A text message on her phone as she was in the shower. The preview on the lock screen lock was from a name saved simply as JH. The message read, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." My blood ran cold. JH. It could be anyone, a friend from the gallery, a relative. But my gut, my newly awakened gut, screamed one name. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. I just watched her get dressed, humming to herself, and I felt the walls of my perfect world start to tremble. Living with that knowledge was like carrying a lead weight in my chest. Every smile from Chloe felt like a lie. Every touch felt like a betrayal. I became a ghost in my own home, a spectator in a relationship I no longer recognized. I'd watch her sleep, her face peaceful and innocent, and a war would rage inside me. The part of me that loved her wanted to shake her awake, to demand answers, to scream until the truth came out. But another, colder, more calculating part of me took over. It was the part of me that Mr. Henderson had trained, the analyst, the observer. It told me that emotion was a liability, that a confrontation without proof was just a fight I would lose. They would deny it, gaslight me, and I'd be left looking like a jealous, paranoid fool. No, if I was going to go down, I was going down with all the facts. I needed evidence. My silent investigation began. I wasn't a spy, but I played one in my own life. I started paying attention to the details I'd previously ignored. The girls' nights out that coincided with Mr. Henderson's out-of-town conferences. The sudden upgrade in her wardrobe, a designer handbag she couldn't afford, a pair of shoes I'd seen in a high-end magazine. She'd tell me she got a great deal or that it was a gift from a grateful client at the gallery, but the stories were flimsy, tissue paper thin. I started noticing his name more, too. She'd mention him casually in conversation. James said the funniest thing today, or James thinks my new series is really coming along. James. She never called him that before. It was always Mr. Henderson. The familiarity was a knife twist. The real breakthrough came from technology. One evening, while she was in the bath, her iPad lit up on the coffee table. It was synced to her phone, and her messages were open. I told myself I wouldn't look. I told myself to respect her privacy. But the image of that text, JH, was burned into my mind. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I didn't have to dig deep. The conversation with JH was right there. It wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown affair, documented in excruciating detail. There were declarations of love, complaints about their respective partners, me and his wife, a woman I'd only seen in a single framed photo on his desk. There were plans for rendezvous, coded language about meetings and deliverables. And then I found the digital smoking gun, a shared photo album. The first few pictures were innocuous, landscapes, cityscapes, but as I swiped, my heart shattered into a million pieces. There they were, Chloe and Mr. Henderson, in a hotel room, in a fancy restaurant, on a beach that looked suspiciously like the one from his recent solo business trip to Miami. She was smiling in the photos, a radiant, blissful smile that I hadn't seen on her face in months. It was a smile he had stolen from me. I took my own phone and, with a cold, steady hand, I photographed the screen. I captured every incriminating message, every compromising photo. I backed them up to a private cloud drive. The evidence was no longer a suspicion. It was a mountain. And I was standing at its peak, ready to start an avalanche. Having the proof was one thing. Deciding what to do with it was another. The initial wave of rage that washed over me was intoxicating. I fantasized about the dramatic confrontation. I'd walk into the middle of one of their meetings, lay the evidence on the table, and watch their faces crumble. I imagined the screaming, the begging, the public humiliation. It was a satisfying, cinematic fantasy. But as the days passed, the hot anger cooled into something else. Something hard, sharp, and strategic. A dramatic scene would be messy.
It would be my word against theirs, and they were both masters of spin. Mr. Henderson was a respected executive. Chloe could turn on the waterworks and play the victim. I'd be the crazy ex-boyfriend who had a meltdown. That wasn't the way. The way to truly destroy them wasn't with a bang, but with the quiet, lethal precision of a scalpel. I needed to use their own world against them. I spent a weekend drafting my plan. It was a two-pronged attack, designed to hit them where it hurt most. For him, his career; for her, her carefully constructed social life and the comfortable lifestyle he was providing. The first prong was corporate. I knew Sterling and Dre's employee handbook inside and out. There were strict policies against fraternization between managers and subordinates, especially when it created a conflict of interest. Mr. Henderson had given Chloe a freelance design gig for the company, a clear breach of protocol. He had also used company funds for their business trips, a detail I was able to confirm by cross-referencing the dates from their messages with the company's expense reports I had access to. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about professional misconduct, fraud, and abuse of power. I spent hours crafting an email to the head of HR. It wasn't emotional. It was cold, factual, and damning. I attached the evidence, but not the sappy love messages. I only included the parts that were relevant to the company. The discussions about the freelance work, the hotel bookings on company credit cards, the proof of their relationship which violated policy. I presented myself not as a jilted lover, but as a concerned employee bringing a serious issue to their attention. The second prong was personal, and it was far more brutal. While the HR email was a business transaction, the email to his wife was an act of war. I found her name, Eleanor, on a company charity event webpage. It took me 10 minutes to find her personal email address and her social media profiles. She was beautiful, with a kind smile, and her profiles were filled with pictures of her children, her dogs, and her life with the man I now knew to be a serial liar. Writing to her was harder. I had to balance the need for truth with the desire not to be cruel. I settled on a simple, direct approach. I introduced myself, explained who I was, and stated that I was writing to her out of a sense of shared pain. I didn't attach everything. I selected 3 photos. One of them together at a work event, looking professional. One of them in the hotel room, looking intimate. And one from the beach trip, where he was clearly on a vacation he had told his wife was work. I told her I wasn't looking for anything, and that I was so sorry to be the one to tell her. I just felt she deserved to know the truth. I had 2 emails ready in separate tabs. One was a corporate missile, the other a personal atom bomb. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the mouse. The world I had known was about to end, and I was the one who was going to press the button. The act of hitting send on those 2 emails was the most surreal moment of my life. There was no triumphant music, no slow-motion explosion, just the soft click of a mouse button, and then silence. A profound, deafening silence. For a moment, I felt nothing. It was as if I had disconnected from my own body.
Then a strange sense of calm washed over me. The decision was made, the die was cast. There was no going back. I closed my laptop and went to bed, but sleep was a distant country. I just lay there in the dark, listening to Chloe breathe, a stranger sleeping next to me. I was no longer just her boyfriend. I was the architect of her impending doom. The next morning at work was a masterclass in tension. I walked into the office and everything felt the same, yet completely different. The hum of the computers, the smell of fresh coffee, the forced cheerfulness of my coworkers, it all felt like a thin veneer over a pit of snakes. I kept my head down, focusing on my tasks, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Every time the elevator doors opened, I flinched. Around 10 a.m., I got the summons, an email from Patricia, the head of HR. Please come to my office at your earliest convenience. My stomach did a backflip. I walked the long hallway to her corner office, my footsteps echoing in my ears. Patricia was a formidable woman in her 50s, known for her no-nonsense attitude and an unnerving ability to make people confess their deepest secrets just by looking at them. I sat in the chair opposite her desk. She didn't offer me coffee. She simply swiveled her monitor towards me, and there it was, my email. She had printed it out, and it was covered in her neat, precise annotations. She looked at me, her expression unreadable, and asked me to confirm that I was the author. I nodded. She then proceeded to ask me a series of questions, her voice level and professional. She wanted to know the timeline, how I had obtained the information, if I had any other evidence. I answered calmly, sticking to the facts, just as I had in the email. I watched her face as she scrolled through the digital folder I had linked. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, disgust maybe, or just the weary resignation of someone who had seen this all before. She thanked me for my courage and my professionalism. She assured me that the company took these matters very seriously, and that a full and confidential investigation would be launched immediately. She told me to go about my day as normal, and that I would be kept informed. The rest of the day was a bizarre exercise in normalcy. I could feel the undercurrent of change, though. Around 2 p.m., Mr. Henderson was called into a meeting. It wasn't with Patricia. It was with the CEO and the head of legal. He walked out of his office, his usual confident stride replaced by a tense, rigid gait. He didn't come back. An hour later, 2 security guards walked into his office with cardboard boxes. They emerged a few minutes later with his personal effects. The plant, the framed photos, the expensive-looking pen holder. Just like that, he was gone. An email went out to the entire company late that afternoon. It was a short, sterile announcement. James Henderson is no longer with the company, effective immediately. We thank him for his contributions and wish him the best in his future endeavors. The gossip machine went into overdrive, but no one knew the real story. They just knew a king had been dethroned. I packed up my things and left the office, the weight on my chest a little lighter. The corporate part of my plan was complete. Now I had to go home and wait for the other shoe to drop. Walking into my apartment that evening felt like stepping onto a stage. Chloe was already home, standing in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She turned when I came in, a bright, practiced smile on her face. She asked me how my day was, her voice light and airy. She had no idea. The world hadn't collapsed for her yet. I mumbled a non-committal answer and went to the bedroom to change, giving myself a moment to breathe. I could hear her humming in the kitchen, the same carefree tune she'd been humming for weeks. It was the sound of blissful ignorance, and it was grating on my nerves. I came back out and sat at the island, watching her. She was telling me a story about a difficult customer at the gallery, her hands gesturing animatedly. I just nodded, my mind a million miles away. The moment came a few minutes later. Her phone, which was lying face up on the counter, buzzed. She glanced at it, expecting a text from a friend or a notification from Instagram. Instead, she saw the email from Eleanor. I watched her face change in slow motion. The color drained from it, leaving her pale and ghostly. Her eyes widened, first in confusion, then in dawning horror. Her hand flew to her mouth, a silent gasp escaping her lips. The humming stopped. The story died on her lips. She dropped the knife she was holding, and it clattered onto the cutting board. She stared at the screen, her thumb scrolling, her body beginning to tremble. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, a silent witness to her world crumbling. What followed was a symphony of silent chaos. She didn't look at me, not once. Her focus was entirely on the small glowing rectangle in her hand. I could see her fingers flying across the screen, typing frantic messages, then deleting them. I saw her pull up Mr. Henderson's number, her thumb hovering over the call button before she thought better of it. Her face was a canvas of raw, unfiltered emotion, shock, denial, anger, and finally, a kind of gut-wrenching panic. She started pacing the apartment like a caged animal, her phone pressed to her ear. I could hear the muffled, frantic tones of her voice as she left a voicemail for someone, begging them to call her back. Then came the storm. She started grabbing things from her closet, throwing them onto the bed. Clothes, shoes, toiletries. She was packing a bag, her movements jerky and desperate. She was a whirlwind of destruction, and I was at the eye of the storm. I saw her open her laptop, her face illuminated by the screen as she frantically closed tabs and deleted files. She was trying to erase her digital footprint, but it was too late. The truth was already out there. After about 20 minutes of this frantic activity, she stopped. She stood in the middle of the living room, a half-packed suitcase at her feet, and finally she looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and filled with a mixture of terror and accusation, but she still didn't say a word. She just grabbed her suitcase and her purse and walked out the door, slamming it behind her. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. She was gone, and in her wake she left nothing but an empty space and the lingering scent of a lie. The first few days after Chloe left were a strange kind of quiet. The apartment felt cavernous and empty. I'd find myself reaching for her in the middle of the night, only to be met with cold sheets. The grief was there, a dull, persistent ache, but it was overshadowed by a grim sense of satisfaction. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed the truth. I went to work, and the Mr. Henderson saga continued to be the main topic of hushed conversation. The official story was that he had left for personal reasons, but rumors were flying. Everything from insider trading to a secret second family was being discussed in the break room. I just kept my head down and played my part, the concerned colleague who was just as shocked as everyone else. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, the bomb went off. I got a notification on my phone. It was a tag from a mutual friend on a public post on Facebook. The post was from Eleanor Henderson. I clicked on it and my jaw dropped. It wasn't a simple "we're divorcing" announcement. It was a masterpiece of public shaming. The post was long, eloquent, and utterly devastating. She started by talking about love, trust, and betrayal, setting a stage of heartbreak that anyone could relate to. Then she named names. She didn't just say her husband had an affair. She said he had a long-term, sordid affair with his much younger subordinate, a woman she named as Chloe. And then she attached the evidence. Not all of it, but enough. The 3 photos I had sent her were there for the world to see. The professional one, the hotel one, and the beach one. Underneath, she wrote a scathing caption about how her husband had used company money to fund his infidelities, betraying not only his family, but also the people who trusted him at work. The post went viral. Within hours, it had hundreds of comments, then thousands. People from our town, people from the company, even complete strangers were weighing in. The comments were a firestorm of support for Eleanor and vitriol for James and Chloe. People called him every name in the book. They called Chloe a homewrecker, a gold digger, a fool. The post was shared and reshared, spreading through our social and professional networks like a digital plague. My phone started blowing up. Friends from college, old coworkers, people I hadn't spoken to in years were sending me messages. "Dude, is that your boss? OMG, I went to high school with that girl. Are you okay?" I felt like I was watching a natural disaster unfold from a safe distance, a disaster I had personally engineered. Then the messages from Chloe started. They came in a torrent, desperate, pleading texts. "Alex, please answer. I can explain everything. He lied to me. He told me he was leaving her. You ruined my life." I read them all, one by one, and felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction. Just a quiet, empty void. I blocked her number. The spectacle was just too much, and I didn't want a front-row seat to her pity party anymore. I was done being a spectator. I just wanted it to be over. A week after Eleanor's post, the dust began to settle, at least in the public sphere. The gossip at work moved on to the next big thing. The Facebook post was buried under a mountain of new content. For everyone else, the story was over. But for me, the final chapter was yet to be written. I was at my desk, trying to focus on a new project, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. A calm, composed voice on the other end introduced herself as Eleanor Henderson. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't spoken to her, of course. I was just the anonymous source of her liberation. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She told me she had my number from a mutual contact at the company. She said she was calling to thank me. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor of emotion beneath it. She told me that she had suspected her husband's infidelity for years, but he was a master manipulator, and she had never been able to find the proof. She felt like she was going crazy, trapped in a gilded cage of her own. She said that the email I sent her was the key that unlocked the door. It gave her the strength and the evidence she needed to finally leave, to file for divorce on her terms, and to ensure she and her children were taken care of. She told me that the public post wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her narrative and making sure he could never lie to or manipulate another woman again. We didn't talk about Chloe. We didn't need to. She was just collateral damage in a war I hadn't even known I was fighting. We spoke for only a few minutes, but in that short time, there was a profound sense of understanding between us, two strangers bound by a single act of betrayal. When we hung up, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I was missing. In the months that followed, life rebuilt itself. Mr. Henderson's divorce was, as promised, incredibly messy and public. The details of his misuse of company funds, which I had provided to HR, became public record during the proceedings, torpedoing any chance he had of landing a similar position. He became a pariah in our industry. Chloe, for her part, vanished from our social circle. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved back in with her parents, her reputation in tatters, the freelance gigs and designer handbags a distant memory. I didn't feel joy in their downfall, but I didn't feel sorrow either. It was simply justice, the natural consequence of their actions. As for me, I eventually quit my job at Sterling & Dre. The place was tainted for me. I found a new position at a smaller firm, one where I could make a fresh start. I moved out of the apartment Chloe and I had shared into a place of my own. It was smaller, quieter, and it was entirely mine. Some nights I'd sit on my balcony with a drink, looking out at the city lights, and I'd think about that ring in my sock drawer. I eventually sold it. I didn't need the reminder. I had learned a harsh lesson about trust and betrayal, but I had also learned something about myself. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I had a capacity for cold calculation I never knew existed. And most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to scream and shout, but to simply tell the truth and then walk away. The story was over, and for the first time in a long time, my future felt like it was truly my own again.